Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the Township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the Township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the Township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, January 20th meeting of the East Lampeter Township Board of Supervisors. I will call the meeting to order, and joining me in the room today is Vice Chair Mr. Thornton, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Meyer, and Mr. Rutt. You'll go ahead and join me for a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have agendas in the back of the room. Sign in, that'd be great. The first item on our agenda tonight is public comment for non-agenda items. So if you have public comment for anything not on the agenda, feel free to share it now.
Just curious, like
If you could state your name for the record for us, and then
Jim,
Jim, go ahead.
how does one go about like talking to a supervisor, like just being able to run some things by, some ideas? Maybe commenting on some of the decisions that have been made.
Probably the easiest way is on the website. We've got all of our email addresses, so you can email any of us, and then we could follow up with you. If it's on the agenda, or you can always ask us in the meeting. You have public comment, anything online submitted? Okay. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And one item of note, we have added under 4D, the request for time extension to record conditionally approved plan Rockville parcel number 235 South Willowdale Drive to that as well. So the items on the consent agenda are the approval of the January 20th, 2025 Board of Supervisors meeting agenda. With that addition, the approval of the minutes of the Monday, January 6th, 2024, 2025 regular meeting. Is that 2025? Yeah. 2025 regular meeting.
Yeah.
All good. Request for financial security reduction. King 419 Mount Sydney Road. The reduction is based on the township's engineer's letter, reducing security by $1,925, leaving a remaining balance of $2,728. We also have item D, which is a request for time extension to record conditionally approved plan for parcel 235 South Willowdale Drive. Don't have that one. What's that time extension for?
March 21st, 2025.
2025. Then item E, approval to pay invoices from all funds for a total of $530,000, $824.73. One item of note in there is $34,886 to Berkshire System Incorporated for a fire system upgrade, which was budgeted for a 2024 project and completed, but the bill wasn't received until late December, so we're paying it now.
To approve the consent agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second, motion by Mr. Meyer, second by Mr. Gallagher. Is there any board discussion or public comment on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? The ayes have it. The motion passes. Next, we have, under old business, item 5A, which is a developer's agreement for Mount Sydney Road pedestrian crosswalks. Is there anyone here for this item? Any background on this, Rob?
Recall when the Lorambo subdivision was a 14 lot, 14 or 15 lot subdivision on Mount Sydney Road across from Suleman Drive. Was approved, the developer and board agreed to create a pedestrian crossing across Mount Sydney Road at Suan Drive. And the township is contributing toward that improvement. The developer is doing all of the design, permitting, and construction associated with it. Township has to get easements from property owners on the east side of Mount Sydney Road to accommodate the landing areas for the crosswalk. And although we've been working to do that, we haven't been successful yet, and the developer wants to move forward with their efforts to obtain permits and get ready for construction in the spring. So this would essentially separate the improvements that they're going to do along Mount Sydney Road and get the permitting for that underway in hand first. And then when we have the easements, they'll go back in, get permitting for those improvements and complete those as well. Hopefully we can make it all come together so we can have to utilize it at this point in time to get the permitting going. This would be a revision to the original developers agreement, which set up the arrangements for the pedestrian improvements.
So motion to approve the updated developers agreement.
Motion to accept the developer's revision to the Mount Sydney Road pedestrian crosswalks, understanding their will return to PennDOT to obtain the permit for the crosswalk and construct those improvements. Hopefully it'll be in time.
Motion by Mr. Thornton. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rudd. Any board discussion, questions, or public comment? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or abstentions? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 5B, the developers agreement for Greenfield Road, Hempstead Road intersection improvements. Is there anyone here for this project?
Yeah.
Good evening, Claudia Schneider, McQueensville, and Nurek. The agreement that's in front of the board this evening is a developer's agreement related to the work that High is going to be doing at Greenfield and Hempstead Roads at the intersection there. The board may recall that the parties previously entered into an agreement related to that work and the use of MTF funding to complete it. This is really just a cleanup item as we begin construction that is conveying between the parties the necessary easements, primarily conveying easements to the township for maintenance of certain of these facilities once construction is complete. The agreement's been reviewed by the solicitor and I believe by staff.
Any comment from staff?
No, this is just to facilitate the ongoing progress there to get this the improvements there constructed.
I'll accept the motion to approve the developers agreement as presented.
Make a motion to approve developers agreement regarding Greenfield Road, Hempstead Road intersection improvements.
Second. Got a motion by Mr. Meyer, second by Mr. Gallagher. Any public comment or board discussion? Hearing none. We'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstentions? And the ayes have it. Thank you both. Moving on to new business, we've got item 6A, the King subdivision plan 24-16, 431 Strasburg Pike. Is there anyone here for this item? We have Mr. Hershey online. Would you like to give us a little overview, Mr. Hershey?
Certainly. So, Mr. King is looking to add about an acre of ground from his adjoining property to the site there at 431 Strasburg Pike. It's about an eight-tenth of an acre lot now. He's looking to make it into a 2-acre lot. We do have a deferral from West Lampeter. As you can see, the municipal line is kind of right there in the front along Strasburg Pike. We do have a second submission and a second review from DMA dated December 6th. There was a zoning matter we needed to attend to in East Lampeter, which was addressed and granted. The only condition on his plan, on his letter of December 6th, is to add the information related to the zoning approval. So I feel as though it's a clean letter. We get recommended approval from the Board of Planning Commission last week. And I think that's it. No improvements are proposed, just merely switching a lot line, changing a lot line around to increase the size of the triangular shaped lot there.
Any comments from staff?
Yes, since you're correct, the township planning commission did recommend conditional approval for the comments of the township engineer as well as county planning department.
Okay, so we've got a letter from DMA and comments from Lancaster County Planning. There a motion?
Approve the King subdivision plan 2416-431 Strasburg Pike. Engineer, December 6th, 2024 letter. Comments from the
Moved by Mr. Meyer, second by Mr. Rutt. Is there any board discussion or questions or comments? Comments from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstentions? Passes. Item 6B, Country Acres Campground.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. Country Acres Campground Land Development Plan 24-24, 2941 Lincoln Highway East.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Joel Swarnick. I'm with David Miller Associates. Ordinarily, we're not here on the land development projects. Justin Smucker apologized for not being able to be here this evening. Representing the Country Acre Campground, we've had them as a client for we presented this land development plan and a small lot add-on to allow for the establishment of an area for their maintenance building to be located. Currently, the maintenance aspects of their property are handled in an area that's in close proximity to other campsites. To address that, they have acquired a property that fronts onto Route 30. And they're also working with the neighbor to take off a point, I'll say, of their property to allow for the establishment of this maintenance building. We'll have a driveway off of the highway and a few parking spaces, and then it interconnects with the rest of the campground with the establishment of a paved driveway that will go over to the campground. So that'll allow them to relocate their maintenance operations, which are basically contained within sheds and what have you on their existing built property. It will be a single-story building. To address the increase in impervious, we propose a interception rain garden, and then there's also stormwater management that occurs on their property and is shared with the neighbor to the east. Stormwater culvert. There will be sewer and water connections made to allow for a bathroom in the space. And there will be a gate established to prevent access from or into this space from those that are staying at the campsite. This is not intended to be a secondary point of egress for campers or anything like that. It's purely for their maintenance.
Okay.
The gates, I think the gate is intended to be close to the entrance here. We did, we do have a review from the engineer. This is their second review. There are some comments outstanding, but we have intentions to address all those comments. We did receive a letter also from the county, and we'll address their comments as well. We did receive approval from the conservation division. We're processing a highway occupancy from the highway and if conditions. Are 2 modifications and 3 deferrals that we're requesting. Modifications are related to the requirement to process a preliminary plan. We've asked if we can process a final plan. The other modification is as it pertains to the providing survey data within 200 feet of the property. We've addressed that with other documentation. The deferrals are related to improvements that are along Lincoln Highway. Lincoln Highway. The deferral of the curb, street sidewalk, and a street tree. Again, these were requested as deferrals versus outright modifications or waivers, with the objective of installing those when it's more appropriate for adjacent development. When adjacent development will occur, there were to be a recorded agreement that would memorialize the. And
Any comments from staff on the plan?
That the planning commission did review the plan and they recommended conditional approval. So we the year review comments and
Questions for the applicant from any of the board members? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the Country Acres Campground Land Development Plan 24-24 for 2941 Lincoln Highway East. Conditional upon approval of the comments from the township engineer.
Motion by Mr. Thornton and second by Mr. Meyer. Any public comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or abstentions? The ayes have it. You are approved.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you too.
All right, next up, we've got item 6C, request for deferral of subdivision process 24-30, Smucker 2715, Old Philadelphia Pike. We're here to talk about this.
I'd like to request the board postpone the decision as to whether or not the grant.
You can state your name. We know who you are, but please.
John Smugger, I'd like to request the board postpone its decision as to whether or not to grant a deferral until its next regularly scheduled meeting. At the meeting last week at the planning commission, staff noted that there should have been more information provided with the application, which I want to do with staff, and I reached out to Tara to try and set up a time. Plus, I'd like to report to the board more information as to whether or not a deferral should or should not be granted. So I'm requesting a postponement to the next meeting.
Any comments from staff?
Mr. Smucker's correct. The planning commission did review the request last week. They recommended the request to defer to the neighboring township. I certainly agree with Mr. Smucker. There was a lot of information missing from the plan. I candidly don't know how that information that's missing could be generated and prepared and put on a plan by the time of your next meeting. But if Mr. Smucker wants a few more weeks, staff has no objection to that.
I think your meeting is February 10th.
Correct.
Okay.
There's no approval that would happen if we don't take action. Like, what would be the next?
You could do a motion to table, and that would just table this item until our next meeting.
And to the extent that an extension is needed, I'm sure Mr. Smoker would agree to that.
Yeah, I was not some additional information that staff wanted as part of the application, so I was here last week.
Yeah.
Not aware of that. So I'd like to be able to cure that. With more.
Okay. I can make a motion to table the request for deferral subdivision process 2430 Smucker 2715.
Second. Motion to table, second by Mr. Gallagher. Any public comment or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or abstentions? Next time. All right, next up, we have item 6D, agreement regarding the deferral of frontage improvements, Rockville redevelopment master plan. Claudia again.
Good evening. So the agreement that is before you this evening relates to one of the buildings in Rockville that's being redeveloped. It's the building where Cookland's home was previously. There's an urgent care tenant that is interested in occupying that space. And Rockville is looking forward, or Fernmore is looking to move forward with that at this point in time. We had several discussions about this with staff. Staff had expressed an interest in having some kind of agreement in place related to deferral of trail and sidewalk improvements on the unit where that building is located. It's referred to in the agreement as Unit C. All of Rockville is a condominium. So this is one of the condominium units within Rockville. Basically, this agreement defers a decision in terms of what trail and sidewalk improvements are going to be required on that Unit C to be part of the larger conversation that we're going to have about Rockville as a whole, and probably are going to be having the next meeting as we come in with the plan for Lot 5. So that's really the purpose of this agreement. Those are all the comments I have. I don't know if staff had anything else they wanted to have.
I think that sums it up with this.
Yeah, just trying to facilitate the process to get the urgent care.
Any questions for the applicant? All right, I'll enter a motion to adopt the trail and sidewalk improvement deferral agreement.
Motion to accept the agreement regarding deferral of frontage improvements for Rockville development as presented.
Motion by Mr. Thornton, a second by Mr. Rutt. Any public comment or board discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Next up, we have item 7, which is supervisor discussion items. Just as an FYI, we've got other items that we've had that are pending further information, either from a supervisor to bring up or staff. So I've left those ones off the agenda, but now we have a quote from staff on open space ordinance requirements.
Yeah, at the end of last week, with all the materials that were provided to the board, we provided a summary of information that had been obtained from other county townships about their ordinances. And just because of a time crunch, I wasn't able to complete the memo that goes along with it until the weekend. So added that information today. And if you didn't get a chance to read over it, I would encourage you to do that. Towards the end of that memo, I had a few suggestions on things that the board might want to consider as changes to the provisions in the current East Lampeter ordinance. When a development comes in, then the developer wants to pay a fee in lieu of the required land dedication. Just by way of further information, since I've been here since the ordinance has been in place in the early 90s, there's been no development that's happened where it has proposed to dedicate some portion of the property being developed to the township for park and recreation purposes. There have been developments where they just developed their own recreation facilities on their property for use by their own tenants or residents, but none that have ever actually given land to the township. So we've had a fair amount of experience with developers paying fees in lieu of land dedication. So one of the things that I think trips, maybe not trips, but becomes an issue is that when a developer proposes a fee in lieu of, the current ordinance makes an effort to distinguish between lands that are, well, let me put it this way. If you'd be dedicating land, 70% of that land has to be land that would be usable for park and recreation purposes. It can't be in a floodplain, it can't be wetlands, it can't be on a steep slope, that sort of thing. The other 30% could be more greenway, open space type ground. But when you're doing a fee in lieu of, that just sort of muddies the water, I think. It becomes an additional complexity that doesn't add anything to either side. So I suggest that provisions related to that in the circumstance where a fee in lieu of is being paid be eliminated. Then the one that I think the board has made efforts in the past to try to address, to try to make the fee calculation more of a formula rather than a negotiation. Many of the ordinance provisions that we saw in the other communities that we surveyed indicate that the amount is to be based upon the market value of the land being developed. And that market value is to be determined based upon an appraisal by an MAI appraiser and one that would be acceptable to the township. It should be made clear, and I think it is clear to the extent it could be made more clear in the ordinance. It should be made clear that the market value that is being requested is a pre-development market value of the land. It does state pre-development in the current ordinance, but I think that should be reiterated in any way to make that clear. The other thing that we don't really have specified in our ordinance and didn't really find in any of the other ordinances are language related to credits that would be given or should be given when development's happening related to the park and open space requirements. So, for example, when a developer comes in and wants to provide some recreation space of their own for their own residents that are going to be on the property, there's nothing in the ordinance currently that makes it clear that whatever acreage is involved in those improvements is a credit against the acreage that is required by the ordinance. So in a residential situation where you've got the current formula being 0.027 acres per residential unit, whatever that number of units is, comes out to a number of acres. And if they're putting in, other, playground, swimming pool, what have you, that area, that acreage that they're providing could be a credit against that total acreage required by the ordinance. Additionally, there's nothing in the ordinance that indicates that if the facility that they're providing on site is going to be open and available to the general public in the same way that it's open and available to their own residents, then there could be an additional credit of the value, whatever it costs to install those improvements against the calculated fee in lieu of amount. My suggestion would be that would only be the case in the circumstance where it is open and available to the general public in the same way that it's open and available to their own residents, rather than if it's restricted just to their own residents, then I would recommend giving a credit for that cost to install them.
So Ralph, they would parse out what it costs to do that.
But you'd use an
Somehow
engineer.
report that.
Right, yeah, I mean, I think you do it by engineering estimate like you do for all the other improvements that are done on any particular project. And if the engineer agrees that, you know, their estimate is fair and reasonable, then that's the credit that would be applied against the fee amount. Those are my suggestions on how try to improve.
When Fernmore was in months ago, potentially a year or more ago, they talked about building up a number of units. Now, clearly, our ordinance, you can't go 5 stories or so in some areas.
Because it's 90 feet.
90 feet, okay, so I recall them making a point about the number of units, you know, a small piece of acreage, right? Is there anything in any of your recommendations or frankly in any of the other municipalities that deal with the fact of going up?
I don't think there's anything in any of the other ordinances. From my perspective, you know, I think the math, if you will, the formula, you know, whatever the number of residential units is a good basis for determining what the amount of acreage ought to be. You know, the other thing I noticed with the other ordinances is if, you know, I averaged the one that we got and how much land they're requiring through this kind of, and ours is actually about 70% less. So we're not demanding quite as much as the others are, but if you've got more units, I think you've got more pressure to provide recreation space
Yeah, I definitely see the pressure part. I wonder if that just, I don't know, if the developer's gonna say, well, you know, the more units I have, I'm trying to save farmland, right? I'm trying to get 9 units per acre. However, now I owe even more in fee in lieu of. So
Is there a way that we could do an incentive to hit a target density?
sure, yeah, I mean,
Or have
because
an extra add-on if you're not achieving target density?
I mean, they're totally separate things, but I can see from, I mean, Firmware definitely brought that point up. I don't remember us ever responding to it in any way, but I just, you know, is there future development that could say, yeah, it's not worth it to.
Is there another question they brought up, which I think is a fair one, is when you're doing a redevelopment, the fair market value calculation is different for that versus if you have essentially green space that you're purchasing to develop. So on the fair market value, I lean towards sort of the West Lampeter model, which is determining in advance what the price per acre is for the township. So any development, whether you're coming in, you're either buying expensive land or cheaper land, you're paying the same fee in lieu of per acre. That sort of sense that they know it ahead of time what that number is. There's a couple ways you could get at it. You could take an average of what's the assessed value per acre of the whole township, set that as the assessed value. We could also look at what's the equivalent number of acres per unit that we're requiring them to pay for.
So the legal concept with the ordinance is that, you know, new development puts pressure on the township to provide recreation space. So the more development, then more pressure. And the money that the township obtains through the payment of the fees is required to be used to either purchase parkland or make improvements to existing parkland to hopefully accommodate those additional residents, those additional users of those facilities. So if you're discounting what some pay, then you're then discounting the amount that the township has available to do this, to be done with those funds, and the funds have to be spent within 3 years. So we have to have, we've got a park and open space plan that has plenty of things on it for the use of those funds. So, you know, we're sort of set up in a good way to say, oh, when these funds come in, we have a place to go with them. But you know, the amount of pressure that's put on is, I think, based upon the amount of development that's going on. So.
Yeah, but I agree with that, but similarly, the pressure, if we get a large development with large lots per unit, that puts pressure on, we have a limited amount of acreage available in the township. So we're not, can't grow that number, so large developments that eat up that land, essentially make it harder to find available open space for everyone else. So, maybe not a discount, but an additional amount required if you're taking large parcels of land and putting one unit on them. Maybe you should pay a premium to do so. In other words, if you're not hitting the county planning's target density, then you pay, 1.5 that amount.
Well, I mean, what we're talking about here is a provision in the subdivision land development ordinance rather than the zoning. So there are some other recreation park and open space requirements in the zoning ordinance that are different. And that's because of different circumstances that can come up with those developments. And they generally work as credits against the saldo. So, for the most part, I would say that if you want to control or do something about the size of lots or the amount of development, that's a zoning issue rather than a subdivision land development issue.
I think there may be an equity issue as well with charging larger, a larger number based on that I believe has already been through the courts. Maybe not in Pennsylvania, but I'm sure there was a case in New York that dealt with this. I would see it differently if there were discounts maybe for affordable housing or housing that's more reasonably priced than is currently out there. Again, it may be an equity issue, but at some point there needs to be consideration for how much housing costs and all the associated fees with it.
Yeah, because in essence, even though this is, from a township standpoint, a great funding source to pay for parks so that we are not necessarily paying for them out of the general fund. On the other hand, we would like to have more housing, and this is just straight up additional costs that the developer is not going to pay for. The residents of those apartments are going to pay for through higher rental rates. So it is a fee that will get passed on to the end user, just like every other fee that we charge a developer gets passed on to the end user. So well, my main points, I like the your items 1, 3, and 4. Item 2, I'd set it so that it's not variable based off of the land you're buying. And I'd love to have staff explore if there are ways to do discounts for either affordable or redevelopment is another one where if there are there's parcels that I would love to see incentives for people to come in and buy and put something better on those existing parcels. So if that's allowable, that might be worth exploring. Any other comments from other supervisors on this item?
Are you saying that deductions or extra charges would be running into equity situations where the state might come in and,
Well, I think we should have our solicitor weigh in on that.
yeah,
Questions?
Good points. Thank you for the research.
I appreciate the recommendations, yeah.
Any comment, Mr. Dingler?
Could you just give me a quick explanation of the parameters of affordable housing? Does that mean the developer goes through this units? Is there a price parameter that they must fit into that? That term affordable housing, I hear it over and over again. Myself and others are asking, what is it? What's the definition of it?
Yeah, so typically it means that the renter is paying 30% or less of their annual gross income from the area. So it's the average sort of income of the area. So if you're paying 30% of your income or less for your housing cost, then it's affordable.
So it's not a set thing. You could have a development for millionaires that could be affordable to millionaires if the pricing is structured as such.
Is the area median income as well. So it's not just, so you have some that are, you can change it based off of you're an individual or you're a family or you're a larger family, but it's based off of the average area median income.
For the developer, it doesn't cause a developer to build a particular affordable housing.
You can.
Yeah.
Or they can so if you're developing in such a way as your target rent is going to be capped at 30% of an area median income, then that would be considered
30% of the area
median income.
Yes.
We don't have anything in our ordinances that requires them to do that.
Correct.
We're talking about market rate right now, the developments that really are front and center in front of us, they're market rate. They're not affordable housing. Rockville's an example.
Rockville can charge whatever they want for those, and they will. And it may be affordable to some people, may not be affordable to others, but it is what it is.
Affordable housing can be expensive for developers. That's why you don't see a lot of it.
but part of that equation is obtaining the land, development costs and all that. So that's, there's layers of expenses that a developer pays before somebody actually walks into one of those units.
It's a good question because a lot of people are hearing things like affordable housing. Sometimes that jumps in their mind to something else. Some people say workforce housing. Some people say medium, middle income housing. There are a number of ways of looking at it. But rest assured, when you see market rate, that's whatever the market's going to bear. And what you'll hear a lot of written about is that there are a lot of people out there right now can't afford that. So where do they live?
Right. Understand that. This is gonna be a long conversation, you guys. Love to be able to just politely interact.
So the HUD rate is basically if you're 30% of area median income right now is $1,837 a month. That's
Market rate now, that's a single bedroom apartment, roughly, to a lot of places. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a number. I understand that. I don't know what that's gonna solve. It seems like there is a lot of push for that sort of thing in the area.
Honestly, I don't believe that's why they're here.
You don't believe that?
They're here for housing and a development that's profitable to them. And
Because the rates are so high here, there's an incentive for developers to build here. But there's limited land for them to build on.
And we have a very good job market. So employers, even to the high-end market, are hearing, well, we'd love to come and work for you, but where are we gonna live?
I appreciate this. I plan on attending meetings. I don't want to be a nuisance. So my farm sits directly across Rockville Road from the host golf course. I was always thankful for the host. After seeing what happened in Rockville, the way somehow or another that zoning was flipped in a way to allow housing instead of commercial. It alarmed me. And I look at that golf course, which I've been around that, I knew that golf course, and there's a struggle there. I'm well aware of that. And I think, my goodness, all it would take would be for this panel to make some changes. And I'm looking at 1,200 houses right across the road from my farm. Like, would it be possible to have, like, in East St. Peter Township Citizens Committee? Anybody who wants to be on a committee on it and can take part in looking at before, like what happened in Rockville, citizens can put input on it.
Yeah, well, what you're doing is probably the best step is to start attending. What I would probably recommend looking at, and speaking for myself and board since I've been on it. So there's what's called the urban growth boundary in Lancaster County set by us, but also recommended by the county planning commission. And that urban growth boundary, we have not changed and have made every effort from staff and previous boards to hold the line at the urban growth boundary. And that urban growth boundary goes right through the golf course. So the portion of the golf course on the back of it is zoned ag, and that's the urban growth boundary. It also goes up to 896, is also right at that boundary as well. So the goal of that is maintain that urban growth boundary, maintain our ag zone, and not put development pressure on the farms, but try to redevelop areas that were failing, similar to Rockville, to say where we already have existing infrastructure, let's try to fit as many things in there and protect that urban growth zone. So that's just, yep.
East St. Peter Township, when the farmers years ago wanted, some of you guys would have been like elementary school or something, we wanted ag, preserve ag security area. You guys fought us to the bitter end on the taxpayers' dime, wanting to not ag preserve. I've never understood that.
Me neither. That was a previous one.
Yeah. But the fact that this rotates, that's something that residents need to keep into consideration.
That was one of the motivating forces for me running. I live on Mill Street, so I'm not too far from. I appreciate I would recommend stay involved, come to the township meetings, and because these things come up in zoning changes. And this is zoning change 2 years before Rockville. This developer even came forward with that. So it's been part of a 3, 4, 5 year discussion on what we could do there. But again, the public is rarely attends. But we also have them on YouTube, so you can also watch a video if you're having trouble sleeping. You can keep an eye on us there.
Yeah, and honestly, we had a crowd here that were happy. We weren't taking new land, we were using developed land. And they applauded that. And I can speak for folks up here. I think we're interested in that, for sure.
Yeah, I would rather see that, which is being done down there at Rockville than on farmland. But we can't just accommodate the traffic all over the township. There's bottlenecks everywhere.
That's going to be a challenge because everywhere, we're just a auto-centric society. When I'll talk about myself. When I pull into a parking lot, I want a parking space for my car. Even though that parking space was empty for the 13 hours before I pulled in there, I want a space for my car to park. So you multiply that against all the trips that are done in East Lampeter Township, Manheim Township, things like that. It just adds up.
All right. Any other discussion items on the open space? So take a moment, in your free time, review that, come with any questions, bring them back to staff and staff with a few items to look at as well, and we can maybe look at some changes and
One more comment from me. Zoning and things like that, that's never a one meeting, once and done, if you miss a meeting. I mean, it's a long process.
I read it in the newspaper, and it was only one of my farming neighbors. Did you hear what happened down in Rockville? I was just like stunned. I mean, so I guess, attending meetings is something that has to be done.
Right.
You know, my neighbor was Jesse. You know, he's trying to do what he's trying to do, and I'm just kind of stunned that the way the big things seem to happen that really impact the community, traffic wise and people wise. It seems like it happens, but yet when you have basically a very small project, it seems like it's pushed hard against it. And in our area, I think agriculture is changing, and you're going to see more and more of Jesse type things happening.
Pennsylvania probably has the most aggressive protecting farm lobby and laws of the whole United States.
Yeah,
I mean, even townships can't touch certain things that are in the agricultural laws, what we can do and what we can't do.
yeah, but it might be worth, yeah, feel free to follow up with an email. This might be an item we could add to the future discussion is, and I'd love to have your neighbor come to Board of Supervisors meeting and discuss things. That would be great.
Appreciate your feedback, really.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
okay. Yep. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Thanks for coming. All right, we'll jump into action items. Item 8A, appointment to Emergency Services Committee Lafayette Fire Company alternate representative for a 2-year term ending 12/31/26 of Mr. Scott Hershey.
Make a motion to approve Scott Hershey as committee as Lafayette Fire Company's alternate representative for a 2-year term ending 12/31/2020.
Second. Motion by Mr. Meyer, second by Mr. Gallagher. Any public comment, board comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or abstentions? Motion passes. B, authorize the sale of township items in municipal bid. We've got a list of items before us, which we put on municipal bid and sell to the highest bidder. There's a motion to authorize the sale of these items on municipal bid.
Sale of township items through municipal bid. As shown.
Second by Mr. Thornton. Any public comment or discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The ayes have it. We have item C, request from the Tonawanda Valley School District regarding school zone warning signals for Fritz on Horny Road. You'll comment on this as well.
Yes, we've had staff level discussion, about the possibility of creating this board on the road. We consider military staff, having discussions with their school board about it. The school board has made a request, through letter, for the township to work with them to create that school zone and erect signals there. We've done this in the past with the school district at other school locations, and the arrangement has been in those past situations that the initial upfront costs, the engineering, permitting, construction costs have all been split equally between the township and the school board. And then thereafter, the township maintains that because we would be the permittee through PennDOT. So wants to work with the school district on this and suggest this kind of arrangement with them, and that we could go back to the school board and say, yeah, we're willing to do this, provided that you share equally in the upfront costs.
Question, Rupp, is the Safe Routes to School grant program only for school districts?
No, I believe, either or both, the township or the school district could apply for that. And yes, thank you for reminding me that that would also be, part of the recommendation that we pursue that funding.
Is there, do we have leeway on those sides of the road to put this equipment in? We're gonna be getting,
Until it's designed, we won't know exactly where it's supposed to be. So, hopefully we would have right of way that we could, install it and it would be a problem, but I don't know that at this point. Our traffic engineers estimated that the construction cost would, and the permitting and everything would be roughly between 40 and 45,000.
I go on the motion from the board to authorize staff to respond to the school district and indicate that we will work with them on this project.
I'm making that, you authorize staff to communicate with Constantine Valley School District about the safe walking zone on Hornicky Road.
It's really, a school zone which would have, flashing warning signal, and during that time, it would be a low speed limit. There are walkers at Fritz, but it's not necessarily a walking limit to the student walkers. It's to slow down the speed on the road.
Okay, so we have a motion from Roger to work with the school district regarding the school zone. Second by Mr. Meyer. Any public comment, discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstentions? Motion passes. Next item 8D, 2025 fire company listing of approved activities is presented here. We do this every year for our workers' compensation. Is this different than last year's at all?
It is not. The Emergency Services Committee reviewed it this past week and recommended the same list.
Okay, your motion.
Make a motion to accept the 2025 fire company listing of approved activities.
Second. Motion by Mr. Thornton, a second by Mr. Rutt. Any public discussion, comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Motion passes. Item 9, managers report.
Yes, the board had discussions earlier in the year about looking at after Chief Zerby provided information on the first year of activity under the nuisance hotels ordinance. Discussion among the board and a suggestion that perhaps we should look at some changes to the provisions of that ordinance. This draft would make essentially two changes to trigger the point at which a hotel, if it becomes a nuisance hotel, at 3 violations in a period of 90 days, and then also set another trigger point at 7 violations in a period of 12 months. We would not advertise this, wanted the board to have a look at it, discuss it, let us know whether you want to move forward with it. And if so, then we could advertise it and have it ready for action at a future board meeting as early as your next meeting, if you like.
What are your thoughts, John?
Our chief is in support.
Yes.
We talked about already the issue with just not having kind of a duplication of the 3 violations in 60. So
I think this addresses all the items that we raised with Chief before. I think it'd be a good thing to do. Okay. Should I make a motion to authorize staff to advertise, or just a motion to authorize staff to advertise the ordinance?
so moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Thornton, second by Mr. Gallagher. Public comment, board comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Abstentions? Motion passes. Any final thoughts from the board or public comment? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Meyer, second by Mr. Gallagher. Any public comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. This is next meeting.